Good afternoon. It is September 19th, about 5 p.m. This is Alyssa Knappen with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, Florida Queer History Project. And today I'm here with...
Inertia. Hello.
Hi, Inertia. Thank you for speaking with me today. To begin, I'll have you state your full name and spell it for the record.
So my full drag name is Inertia, and it's spelled Inertia. I hope I spelled that right. That would be embarrassing.
I think you got it, yeah. All right, so what are your pronouns? How do you identify?
In drag, she, they. Out of drag, he, they.
Okay, great. So where and when were you born? Tell me a little bit. Are you from Florida? How does
So no, I'm not from Florida, but I mean, I was born in Rhode Island.
Oh, wow.
But I moved to Florida when I was really young, so I basically have been here my entire life. I lived in South Florida for many years, went to high school there and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Went to college here, actually, at UF. And so I've been in Gainesville ever since. I left Gainesville after I got my bachelor degrees, and went to Georgia Tech for a little bit, for a couple of months, and then for about 7 months to a year to do half my master's, and I came back here to finish it because it was expensive, and I wasn't enjoying the research there. I enjoyed it better here. So.
How would you say your relationship with Florida has evolved over the years? Do politics influence this relationship?
Oh, a big deal.
Or your sentiments in any way? Big deal.
Yeah, Florida, it's a love-hate relationship. I'm comfortable with Florida because I've been here so long, but I've never really been happy with Florida because Florida tends to be, it's a very red state most of the time. I was happy in Gainesville though, because Gainesville tends to be very blue. Around the college area, it tends to be very liberal, and then outside of it, of course, you get pretty conservative. So it's like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah. You said you were from South Florida, right? So tell me a little bit, if you're comfortable, about your upbringing, your family life. Were you raised religious? What kind of
So no, my family's not religious. And in terms of upbringing, I was pretty boring, to be honest with you, because I was focused on in school and doing well, because I knew I wanted to be an engineer and do that kind of stuff. And so I kind of focused on schooling and getting into college. And so when I got here is kind of when I started being more free, if that makes sense. I didn't really think about it when I was younger. So.
Was queerness or just being gay discussed in your youth, if at all?
Oh yeah, my aunts are gay.
Yeah.
So my entire life, it's been in front of me. My family's very accepting, obviously. Obviously my aunts are. It's never really been an issue. We weren't one of those families that was very religious and very against it from the get-go. So I had nothing, I had nothing to hide. So when I finally came out, it was nothing. It was absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so you would consider yourself a queer person?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the use of queer to describe LGBTQ plus people? Because it used to be a slur.
Yeah, I like it because I feel like identity is not quite as black and white as people think it is. And so queer is a really nice way of just kind of summarizing this, I'm not, it means not the norm, I suppose, but then there's no such thing as norm as a thing.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot less work than saying LGBTQ+.
Well, yeah, there's a lot, and there's a lot of labels now, so it's hard to kind of pinpoint where you are necessarily on that spectrum. So queer is kind of
So you said that your experience coming out was pretty easy. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Basically, when I got to college, and I finally was away, I could take a breath. So I was not focused on just getting into school and my future. I had time to reflect on myself, and I was like, yeah, I think I might be queer. And so I just called my mom and was like, hey, by the way. And they were like, oh, they said the cliche, oh, we knew. I don't believe it. But it is what it is. Now I would believe it, but back then I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay, well that's lovely. That's good to hear.
It's a privilege for sure to not have a rough time coming out, I have to say. So, because I'm friends with a lot of people who are still not good terms with their parents or something like that. So I was very lucky to have a good family like that.
Yeah.
So.
Do you ever feel sort of excluded or marginalized in your immediate community?
In the immediate community? At the beginning, yeah, actually before I did drag, yes. Because I wasn't I never really went out to the clubs or anything like that, and I was not a big fan of Drag Race or anything like that before I discovered the art. So I wasn't I didn't fit the very stereotypical social norms of being a queer person, especially like a queer male. So like I was like, it's kind of like the same kind of stereotypes exist in any like kind of like, what am I trying to say? Like demographic, right? You have your nerds and you have your popular people. I was definitely not one of the popular queer people, like one of the popular gays. And I felt it was difficult, especially at a college. It's really hard to fit in that way. So yeah, I felt excluded for sure. I went to like PSU meetings here and stuff like that, and I got myself involved with Pride Awareness Month to get more involved in the community and stuff. But and OSTEM and stuff like that when I was a student. But I didn't mentally feel like I fit in until I did drag. It's a completely different dynamic.
Yeah. So kind of going off of that, tell me about the spaces in which you feel comfortable expressing.
So at this point in my life, I've been doing drag for 6 years. And I'm a show host and show director at the University Club. So the University Club is the only gay bar in Gainesville. So it's kind of a big deal to do drag there because it was one of the only spaces to do drag. I would say at this point, I'm pretty well known among the people who know drag queens in Gainesville. And so that has really changed the dynamic. So I'm pretty comfortable. Anywhere that anyone wants to book me, I go and I feel comfortable. And again, that's a privilege because I do feel safe because I've worked hard to create my image. So like, generally when people book me somewhere, they know who I am, and it comes with people come with me, and so I feel safe performing just about anywhere, but most comfortable at the University Club, at any like Pride events. Like Pride's coming up in September, end of this month. I'll be performing at that as well. So like I feel comfortable in those spaces. However, I do think it's interesting because there's still some spaces that I get booked at occasionally, like restaurants really like capitalizing on like drag brunches, but it doesn't always feel accommodating. It just kind of feels like you're there to make the money and you get your little check and you move on. So there's still like, obviously, like it got even worse with the whole with the drag ban ideas that came up and stuff like that. But I feel comfortable just about anywhere, right? I have no issue expressing. I've performed on this campus many times. So I did a makeup workshop like 2 years ago when Pam was still going on, and I was just walking across campus in drag. I have no issues with it anymore.
So do you work with any communities or organizations that forward LGBTQ related issues? Yeah,
so I work heavily with I work heavily with the Pride Center of Gainesville, the ones that put on Pride, the ones that they do a whole bunch of events. I host their Pride parties at First Magnitude. I'm co-hosting Pride with Immigration. So yeah, I work with them all the time. I think I also have worked with Planned Parenthood in Gainesville, especially when Roe v. Wade was overturned. That was one of the first things we did. So yeah, some of the major ones I work with, and I've worked with organizations here on campus like PSU and PAM before, just from their drag shows and whatnot. But
and that's been very fulfilling.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure.
It's interesting. Drag is a really interesting tool because you get a really big platform, like within the community, and you can use it to raise quite a bit of money for causes that you want. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Would you argue that being queer in Florida is inherently political?
Oh my God, yeah. It's like impossible, because even in cities like Gainesville, which are relatively liberal because of the college, even like you can go to a Publix on the outskirts of town and you'll still get looked at weird. I get looked at weird because I have no eyebrows because I shaved them off for drag. I've had them off for years. I was like, you still get looked at funny. And then people who really express themselves, like I wouldn't consider myself very expressive today, just a t-shirt and cargo pants. But like, people are expressive all the time. People, how they dress, their hair color, the way they look. And they'll have rainbow flags and little pins and stuff on them too. They'll be very open with their partners in public and stuff like that. And they'll get looked at weird all the time, dirty looks. I see them all the time. People look you up and down just for looking queer. You might not even be queer, but you might look queer. Yeah, Florida is not fun for queer people.
Do you think it's changed, like, in the past decade or so?
Both good and bad, yeah. I think at one point it was getting much better. But I think it ties with like the country's political history too. Like around the time that same-sex marriage was legalized, there was like a nice upward momentum.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of pushback, at least that what I saw. I was young when that happened. So it was, I didn't feel the political pushback. I'm sure if I asked like my aunts, who got married during that time actually because they could legally, I'm sure they'll explain that they might explain that they felt pushback, but it felt great. Coming to college here in 2014 is when I started. 2014 all the way through my grad program where I ended around 2022, I think, never felt any, like I've never felt like an issue being openly queer at this college. I see queer people here all the time. There's a great queer community here. And then in Gainesville too. But then with DeSantis getting in, definitely felt a huge difference. But also not just DeSantis, it was like Trump's presidency too. There's a lot of hateful rhetoric that got pushed forward because it was allowed to get pushed forward. And that has we're still feeling repercussions from that, from what I understand. Because people were not as vocal back in the day. They may have felt the same way, but they were not as vocal about it because they knew it was wrong, but now they think it's okay. And they still feel that way. So it's like, it's kind of a mess.
Yeah. Have you heard of the Protection of Children Act, which targets drag queens under the guise of protecting children, and of course the famous Don't Say Gay bill, Parental Rights and Education Act? How did the news of that legislation affect you? How did you respond to it?
It's complicated. Well, it's complicated as like a drag queen. So like most of my gigs, if not like 99% of my gigs, there are no children there. I work in bars, right? So like kids are not allowed to be there. The only time kids ever really show up to gigs are brunches, right? Yeah. Brunches and stuff like that, unless or like specifically family-friendly shows, but it's like never a thought. Like it kind of drove me crazy because we're wasting our time on something that you're protecting children. I mean, like, personally, I think there's more of a danger of getting like shot in a school than there is from a drag queen at a brunch show. We go to shows to do our job. It's a job. It's art. It's a job. We get paid, right? And if you want to bring your kids to a brunch, cool. Usually, if it's a family-friendly show, the show host will tell you it's family-friendly, so you can't do like excessive cussing, you can't do anything explicitly sexual, which you don't want to do anyway at a brunch.
Just when you know that there are children there, you're not going to do that.
Right, so most drag queens know this. I'm not going to say like every drag queen didn't follow the rules, right? But it's an argument to be made that I don't think kids should be necessarily they shouldn't be at clubs anyway. And then if the brunch is not advertised as family friendly, that's on the parents, that's not on the drag queens, right? Totally. Because if it's someone's art to want to do something funny, a comedy number, or they want to look naked, and I say look naked because it takes a lot. When we look naked, it's like we're actually wearing more clothes than most people at the venues because we're wearing layers of tights and pads and stuff like that, and it's all to give the illusion of like skin. So I don't know. It was a complicated thing because I was just kind of surprised that it was even an issue in the first place. You're protecting kids from what? Like, what are we doing to kids? Because since that bill, not that I had been looking at it before, but since that bill had been passed or like brought up or like suggested, I think I have not found a single drag queen that I know or have seen on the news that has been accused of like molesting a child or any kind of like act with a child. But I've seen teachers, priests, like pastors, like politicians. Oh my God.
The people implementing the laws.
Yeah. I'm like, so what are you protecting the drag queens from? I'm sorry. Take your kids. What are you protecting the kids from? Because the drag queens aren't doing anything.
Why do you think the queer community has been vilified and been regarded by politicians and parents as a threat to children?
Because it's not the norm. My actual deep-rooted answer is religion. I think religion has a really nasty history of dictating what people believe is right and wrong. Christianity specifically, if you're a good old Christian, you're seen as like higher than everybody else. If you're not religious and you're queer, you're automatically wrong and bad and dirty because you're going against the word of God or whatever. I'm not religious, so I don't know much about it. I've just been told many times in my life that like if you're gay or a drag queen or something like that, or you're a cross-dresser or stuff like that. These words that like it's against the Bible. It goes against God's will, and you're going to hell. And so that's why they vilify
so
us.
So it's very intertwined with religion.
Oh my God, yeah. If there wasn't religion, why would people have an issue with it? I don't think people have an issue with it at all. They only have an issue with it because a book that they're reading that they can't even tell me is true, right? For a God that they believe in that they can't even prove is real, told them that in a sentence that's been translated multiple times by multiple people, by which it's been translated to fit the person in charge, always, historically, it says man shouldn't lay with man, and they're said, okay, you can't be gay. God says you can't be gay. Yeah. And that's that. And then so anything associated with queerness from that point on is vilified. And it's always religion. If there wasn't religion, they wouldn't care. They would have no one to tell them it's bad. They just don't like it because it makes them feel icky. Because their entire life they've been told that it should be a man and a woman. And that's why, I mean, issues like trans issues are a big deal for them too, because when you start blowing out the window of gender, they lose their minds.
The whole societal hierarchy falls apart. Ruins the power dynamics that are in place.
Also, drag is historical. Like, it's been going on since, I mean, like, literally well before the establishment of, like, the United States. So, I mean, I don't understand. It was never an issue then. It's not an issue now. They just need a scapegoat to attack queer people. That's what, I mean, that's really what it is. We all know it, too.
What is wokeness?
Oh, Jesus.
And what does it mean within the context of our discussions and its implications for the queer community?
I think woke is a stupid word. I think it is one of those hot words that's used as a political weapon, specifically by Republicans, and it wasn't always that way. It's more so conservative Republicans specifically. And it just basically means if someone calls you woke, it just means that you are not a good little Christian. Like, that's what it means. It means that you're straight. It means you're cis. It means that you don't do drag. You have no visible queerness at all. You don't support it. That's what it means. Like, if you're not woke. And if you're woke, it means that you support it. You can be called woke just because you're like, well, yeah, I believe gay people should get married. You're woke. You're a bad person. You shouldn't be voting. Like, what? I don't understand. It's stupid is what it is. In the grand scheme of things, it's just a political hot word. There's a lot of political hot words right now that they use to get their like sheep mentality. You call someone, you don't have to explain it, you just have to call them woke, and all of a sudden you've got an entire population who's like, I'm not voting for this person, or I'm not supporting this person. They're woke. They're trying to push our woke agenda on us. What does that mean? Acceptance? Like minding your business? I don't understand.
I wish I had the quote in front of me, but I believe that there was a court case where they tried to define it. And they had said it had something to do with acknowledging inequalities between sexual, gender, racial lines.
It's the very privileged people who are allowed to use it as like an insult. I mean, if someone calls me woke, I'll be like, okay. I'm like, and? Your point?
Yeah.
I'm like, why aren't you woke? I think it's kind of funny because it's like, you spin it the other way. So if all these people who believe in acceptance, equality, and acknowledging the inequalities between gender, identity, like sexualities and stuff like that, if you call us woke, then does that mean everyone else is like asleep?
Right. Like, I was just thinking the same thing.
So I don't understand.
Right. Yeah. Would you describe drag to be an act of resistance?
Yes. Any drag queen who says differently does not know their history, right? I mean, drag was created by Black trans women, right? I mean, like, think about Stonewall, right? It's always been an act of resistance, always. And it's always gone hand in hand with the trans community, which is why there's a lot of misconceptions that, like, if you're a drag queen, you're inherently trans. That's not true. But, like, there's a lot of trans drag queens as well. And sometimes drag helps them discover who they are. So, it's 100% political.
How would you define drag?
That's a big question.
Is it gendered?
I think it's changed. So like in the past, drag was about female impersonation, but as time has gone on, it's more, in my opinion, it's an art form. It's about transforming, right? Especially like with the type of drag that I do, I can become anything I want to be. I do a lot of female presenting drag, but I've done some really wacky like character drag before too. And I think anyone can do it. It's just art. I just think of it as like an art. Like do you want to learn how to paint? Do you want to learn how to draw? Or do you want to learn how to do drag, right? It's like a form of theater. I mean, it always has been, but back in the day, it was very like female impersonation. That's what we do. But there's also drag kings who are male impersonation, and then everything in between. So
like burlesque dancers.
Burlesque I wouldn't count as drag because they're their own community, but there are drag burlesque artists too who are drag queens who do burlesque. So because I work with the burlesque community here, and they're not drag queens, but they work literally with us on shows all the time.
Yeah, I've seen that. How can allies leverage their privilege in support of resistance efforts? What can straight allies do to
So I say it all the
support
time when I'm hosting the show, and I hear other show hosts, especially at UC, say it, but like, if you come out to a drag show and you said you and your friends want to go to a drag show and drink a little bit and tip the queens and watch the show and have a good night, you just have to remember that when time comes around and there's bills being thrown around like banning drag, you better be voting for not banning drag, because you don't get to enjoy something and then turn around and like stab it in the back. So I think that's what allies can do. They can show up, they can show out, and they can essentially put your money where your mouth is. Like if you're an ally, prove it. Then don't vote against acceptance, right? If there's a drag ban, don't vote against, don't vote for it, vote against it. If there's bills limiting gay marriage or these bills that are attacking trans people, don't vote for them, vote against them. That's what you can do. That's literally the only thing you can do. An ally is like a state of mind. To be an actual ally, you have to actually do something, because allies typically have the most privilege, right? They're not queer. I mean, I still don't think, for example, like I could donate blood, right? I think in Florida.
Right, I think that's correct.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. We'll
I think
transcriber check that.
Check it. But because I think so. It may have changed recently, but I remember like when I was in school, I still couldn't donate blood just because I was gay. I was a gay man who had sex with other men, and therefore you can't, because of the risk of AIDS, which is ridiculous because anyone can get that.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think there was a statistic, which you might have to check also. At one point or another, I think unfortunately, it was like black women who had the highest, like having AIDS percentage. I think it was like in Africa too, or something like that as well. And it's like not gay men. It used to be, but not anymore. I don't think it is anymore, but
yeah.
So it's just like a stereotype.
Right. So we talked a little bit before we started the interview about a quote from an interview from 2012. I'll read it again. I had these I had these two very good friends who were drag queens who said, "If something happens to you, we'll start a Stonewall for us." End quote. What does this mean to you, and how do you interpret it?
Well, I mean, obviously, Stonewall is that historical moment, and I mean, it's like a metaphor for literal change. Like, and I think to me, it just translates that if you want something done, you have to do it yourself. Like, if things get tough, I mean, I feel like it was going to happen. If all of those bills had actually passed, because I think a lot of them did get shot down by judges, thankfully, that I know of. If a lot of that had passed, you would have probably seen another, like, Stonewall moment. There was a march on Tallahassee, and there was marches on capitals all over the country, drag marches. I think friends of mine had organized like literally buses of drag queens from all over the state of Florida to march on Tallahassee to protest the drag bans. And so it already started the resistance of it, because it's like you can't limit something you don't like. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it can't happen. That's what I think that means. So like start a Stonewall, it's like, I mean, if you ban drag, you're gonna have a bunch of drag queens who are going to fight back, 100%.
Who just to kind of shift from the darkness of political discourse to something a little bit lighter, who in the LGBTQ community inspires you? And why do they inspire you?
It's a loaded question. Let me see here. So like within my...
Think about that.
It's weird because like I don't take a lot of inspiration from like really famous LGBT like people in media and whatnot. Like, I think it's nice that there are queer people in media. It actually just makes me sad though, like when I start like looking at them, because they get so much hate, like just for being themselves in media. Like sometimes, like for example, on that TikToker Dylan Mulvaney, the trans woman, like she didn't do anything. She's just trans, and she got really popular, and now she's getting a lot of brand deals. And then she had a deal with, I think it was Bud Light, put her on a can, and it was like the biggest controversy known to me. So like I try not to take inspiration or like I don't get inspired by like famous LGBT people. I feel bad because like once that door opens, it's just a lot of hate that they get. I take more inspiration from queer people in my life.
Yeah. So
like my drag mother who passed away, she was like. Her name was Aurora Summers. She was a drag queen. She'd been a drag queen for years. She adopted me when I started drag. And like, she was like a proud Black trans woman, and like did drag, and she always spoke her mind, and she always was at the charity events and always ran charity events and benefits for these organizations. I think foot on the ground kind of stuff is like inspirational. I mean, like, I think it's cool that there's like queer icons and whatnot, but like, you know, like Elton John and like people like that. Like, there's obviously like queer, like, you know, Freddie Mercury and stuff like that, that through history got famous and people like them. But we, you know, once you become a certain level of famous, it's like you can actually kind of hide. So I think the real inspiration comes from like queer people who are day-to-day people who are not just like mega famous, and who are actually, they got their feet on the ground and they're doing stuff. Not to say that queer people in media aren't raising money,
course, yeah.
but just like, you know.
And they can inspire you on a more personal level because you really know
I mean,
them.
like, I think it's cool that like there's movie stars that are queer and stuff like that, but.
Right.
And I mean, queer politicians who are like, I would say that they're also inspirational.
Yeah.
Though being a politician is inherently, it's a tricky one for me, because there's a lot of queer, there are queer politicians, not a lot actually, but there's queer politicians, but like politics is such a weird thing. I don't find anything in politics to be inspiring at all, because no matter which side you're on, like, you're not, like, I don't know, it doesn't feel very for the people lately, no matter which side you're on. So I don't care if you're queer and a politician, you're a politician. So I'm like, nah. I want people who are actually doing things for the communities. So.
So kind of to wrap up, I wanted to ask a couple questions about drag and queer culture. So you said something interesting. You said your drag mom. What was her name?
Aurora.
Aurora. Are there like hierarchical relationships?
Kind of. It's like a
drag
mentorship.
families?
So
Yeah,
like they call them like, I mean, and it all, to be clear, like it all comes from like houses and mothers and stuff like that. Drag really originated in ballroom scenes, like historically. So drag is just kind of a facet of that, came from it. And so when we say like drag parents, we mean like drag queens who essentially mentor younger drag queens to help them in their career. Because drag, ultimately, while it is an art form, it is a career. And it is like a full-time job for a lot of people. And so in order to succeed, you have to do it well, meaning that you have to get better at performing, you have to be personable, your makeup has to get better, your costumes have to get better, and drag parents are a way of doing that. Like, I have a drag kid now too. So it's like, excuse me, I have a drag kid now too. And it's like, you teach them things. It's like, because you're not always gonna be around, right? And so you wanna make sure your legacy lasts too. So it's like it's a whole thing. But really, it also comes from like friendships. So like a lot of drag parents are really good friends with their drag kids, and they take that as a way to build their own little community. So like the chosen family thing.
I was just about to ask about that. Yeah, would you say it mirrors sort of family dynamics?
Yeah, not always perfectly. Like my late drag mother definitely felt like a mother. Whereas me and my drag kid, we're really close in age. So it's like, I don't feel like a parent. I just feel like someone who is older in drag and has more experience, who's teaching them things.
Right.
But they're really good friends with me. So it's like, yeah, you end up getting a really great like little network of family members who you can depend on. So.
That's lovely. So what are your thoughts on current social justice movements? You mentioned that you're pretty active politically, that center around LGBTQ issues like Pride. You mentioned you participated them. Share some of your experiences doing that. How do you feel about it?
So I've performed at Pride like just about every year I've been here, and it's been fun. It used to be a charity event, but now the money gets raised beforehand, and we don't, vendors are there, and we raise a lot of money for it. So now we kind of just entertain at Pride. But I really like Pride. And so I participate, I host, I interact with people. It's like the only chance, it is family friendly, so it is a chance for like the drag entertainers and all the queer people who are in Gainesville to kind of like meet each other. And like when I was younger, if I had discovered it when I came out before I went to Pride in Gainesville, but if I had discovered it and I wasn't, sure I fit in, I would be like, oh, okay, this is a great community. I have a community I can reach out to. So like that. But then also like we did a drag show to raise money for Planned Parenthood, and we raised over like, I don't know, I think it was like $1,200 something for the local Planned Parenthood in Gainesville after Roe v. Wade got overturned. So I mean, that felt good because you can use your platform to really like raise money and actually put some things into action. So that's been my experience with it. I've done benefits before too, so.
So women's rights, racial rights, civil rights, these are all deeply intertwined for you with queer.
Oh yeah, I mean it should all, any marginalized community is involved in another marginalized community, I think. So like if drag and queer people are their own form of marginalized community, but even within the queer community, like the people who have it the hardest are going to be like Black trans women, right? Just like historically, Black people have it the hardest in this country or in the world too. So it's like it's all together, like women too. Any marginalized community, basically anyone who is marginalized, we stand together. So like as a drag queen, I can, politics aside, it's just like doing the right thing. It's like I can use my platform as a drag queen. Yes, I'm marginalized because I'm queer, but I have more privilege than some. So I can use that to raise money if I can. I have a decent status. I've been working a long time. So if I want to put a show together, I could put a show together and we could get a lot of money raised for a certain cause. I've seen people even do drag shows to raise money for just like a member of the community who's like a homeless, right? And to help them get back on their feet. So it's like the like trans community, the queer community, the drag community, like it's all hand in hand. So I mean, I think it all goes together.
Yeah.
No one knows what it's like to be marginalized more than marginalized people. So we get it.
Yeah. Are you optimistic about LGBTQ plus freedoms and our ability to uphold these freedoms in the current future political climate?
In Florida, in the country, like more so. I mean, how awkward this would be, but I do feel in my heart that I think Kamala Harris will win the election coming up. It just feels like it's going to happen. Not even just like opinion aside, it just feels right. And I think that will hopefully simmer down some of this like rhetoric that's going on. But basically, so long as people like Trump exist and all of those like MAGA Republicans exist, I'm not really optimistic until there has to be a point where it's just like that is wrong. And if you act that way, like you can't sit at the table kind of thing. Because I don't know why it doesn't feel good. I don't know. I'm optimistic that things will get better because I'm always optimistic, but I'm realistic in the sense that like even if Trump loses, which I think is going to happen, who's to say? And let's say he loses and then like retires or even dies or something like that. Someone else from his little brainwash cult will come up feeling the exact same way. There are worse people than Trump actually within his own little community. So it scares me that like, and because we saw with DeSantis, he came in so quickly, all of this nasty stuff happened. And so all it takes is one person with power. So like, I'm not that optimistic. I'm hopeful that it will happen, but I'm not optimistic until we basically get to a point where like both sides of the coin can agree that like human rights should not be a discussion, a debate.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to add to the record or that you might want to discuss in regards to what we've been talking about?
I'm not a fan of DeSantis, obviously, but no, I don't think there's much for me to add.
Okay. Well, I so greatly appreciate you coming in. This was a lovely interview. You are so eloquent. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this.